This is a production of Off the Hook Sports with Dave Hooker.
Josh Ward with us, brought to you by Zool Beer. Go to zoolbeer.com. That's XUL. If you're listening audio-wise, if you're watching video-wise, you can see it right there. Go to zoolbeer.com. It is fantastic. We're going to talk more about that here momentarily, and they've got some great promotions coming up at Zool Beer downtown. Panoramic view, great place to hang out. So Josh Ward joins us from The Sports Animal. And Josh, ultimately, Tennessee is named and this isn't a surprise, but the winner of the All-SEC trophy for sports across the board. This takes into account every single sport. So I can't say that just on the surface I'm surprised. When you look at what the baseball team did, softball's always good, basketball is good, football. Pretty impressive feat, first time in about 15 years.
It really is, with what Tennessee has been able to do throughout all the different sports that don't get as much attention, probably should. And they've done really well in tennis. Golf has improved. So sports that fans are happy to see that they're doing well, but don't typically keep up with on a regular basis unless that really is their sport of choice. They're doing really well there. And then the sports that you mentioned that Tennessee really does count on, they've at least improved, like Tennessee football, or they've helped lead the way like Tennessee baseball. Basketball is just in a really good shape. If you look, I think, around the nation and you were trying to figure out right now top 15 to 20 programs over the last 5-6 years, however you would describe it, then Tennessee's going to be in that conversation. And this upcoming year projects as a top 20 team. And then softball has just been a staple. So overall, right now, and fans will always knock on one when you start talking about the positive vibes, but Dave, we've had this kind of conversation for several months now about, hey, things are really going well. And since Danny White has taken over as athletic director, the ship seems to have been steadied and the results on the field have gotten better.
Yep, they have. I want to ask you a tough question. Who would Tennessee trade places with right now in the SEC? Because we can say overall they are the champion of the academic year, but still football is football. There's some obvious ones, but we'll break them down as well. If I haven't mentioned yet, which I have, and you haven't heard yet, you have got to go to Zool Beer. They recently won gold for the best hazy IPA in the world at the World Beer Cup with Rhymes Like Dimes. And Josh, you tried one, quite tasty. Your thoughts? I'm a fan.
Rhymes Like Dimes, very good. Highly recommended. Yep.
Great stuff. All right, let's turn to the SEC. I can't see anyone that is just a slam dunk other than Alabama, Georgia, that Tennessee would trade places with, trade the last academic year with. And that's because football is so big. If we go top to bottom, Tennessee wins the trophy. We've discussed that. But football is the king. It's hard not to trade places with Alabama or Georgia and what they've done, winning championships in both cases. Who else do you think Tennessee would trade places with outside of those two as far as the past academic year or even moving forward with what they have in place?
It's not a long list.
No.
Alabama and Georgia for sure, because football just is so heavily weighted in this conversation. If it were a stock portfolio, it's taking up a very large percentage and very few shares would be left over for many of the other sports that do count when we're talking about the All-SEC trophy or recognition. So look throughout football. Tennessee football is in a good position, trending in the right way, but there are other programs where Tennessee wants to be. Texas A&M is an interesting one to bring up because they have all the money too, and that's what you want. That's what you need moving forward, and Tennessee's doing well in NIL. A&M is arguably doing better than anybody in the country. Texas and Texas A&M, in fact, have quite the battle going on there. So A&M is an interesting one to bring up. LSU's a weird one, though. Baseball is all of a sudden surging. Tennessee's been in a better position the last couple of years. Now LSU's trying to make a big splash. Basketball is now restarting. Football, though, still has so much potential where if you're able to win a national title with Les Miles and Ed Orgeron, you probably start to feel like, well, we can do it with anybody. How about now Brian Kelly? So maybe LSU, maybe Texas A&M. I don't think Florida at all. So Auburn, no, definitely not. Kentucky, definitely not. So it has to be a football trade before you do anything else. And I think right now you look at Texas A&M, you look at LSU as the possibilities. Florida Florida a couple of years ago would say, yeah, sure, make that trade in a heartbeat. Now I would say absolutely not. I'd go the other way.
Let's look at LSU for a second. Our conversation with Josh is brought to you by Zool Beer XUL. If you're listening on audio, Zool Beer downtown. They've got beer ice cream. It's fantastic. The newest flavor is Insane Creamsicle made with tangerine mafioso. 5% ice cream cone that's creamy and still lactose free. I think the bottom line is with LSU, do we see Brian Kelly make the social adjustment? He tried to fake the accent, which was goofy and all that stuff. But ultimately, does he make that adjustment? Because he's one of those war daddies, those big guys in the middle up front for so long on defense. He's going to be able to get them at LSU. Just the cultural difference, I question.
For sure. I mean, it's weird. It's a weird fit. But also on the football field, he's just much better than Les Miles and Ed Orgeron. Like it would be embarrassing to try to compare Miles and Orgeron's ability to Brian Kelly, and they won national titles. So I think Brian Kelly is among the elite coaches on the field. Again, weird fit, but part of the reason I think LSU is so valued as a program is that it hasn't seemed to matter. I mean, Nick Saban could have done even more if he had stayed at LSU. Obviously, he did not. But the fact that they've been able to win national titles in the last 20 years with 3 different coaches, there aren't many programs that could say that they can just do that, especially with coaches like Ed Orgeron that really didn't go well at Ole Miss, and USC said, no, we'll go in a different direction. Maybe they shouldn't have. And then, Les Miles don't have to keep going through there. So I think it's going to work out, but it's also the program I'm maybe most fascinated with around the country because the fit is so strange with Brian Kelly. But the reason he went there is because they're going to have players that give them a chance to win a national championship. By the way, we get the head-to-head. So if we're having this comparison to Tennessee goes to Baton Rouge this year, and Tennessee's going to have a really good chance to win that game. I think Tennessee's staff overall, top to bottom, matches up okay with LSU. LSU probably still has a personnel advantage despite some of the players they have to replace. But, again, that's why LSU is so valued because they're just going to have players no matter who the coach is.
Talking to some Tennessee players on Off the Hook Sports, I'm pretty impressed by their attitude. I mean, they're not going to say anything. It's bulletin board material. But the players I've talked to have all said, I don't think that's that big of an upset. It was called like the upset pick of the year nationwide, the going to Baton Rouge and winning that game. But they don't seem to think of it as that big of an upset. If you had to guess what the spread is right now? 5 points? Where are you?
I would have said 4 to 6. 4 to 6 points LSU favored. But I would agree. I think it will be an upset. I think Tennessee will be an underdog if Tennessee goes there and wins. But I think there are only 2 games this year that would be a big upset for Tennessee if the Vols win, and that's against Alabama and Georgia. I think Tennessee has a chance, a very reasonable chance to be favored at home against Florida, should be favored at home against Kentucky, Missouri. Depending on how the season goes, it's the next to last game. But right now, Tennessee would project as a favorite against South Carolina. So, yeah, I think you have 2 games that would be big upsets. LSU would be one, but it's one that week. I think you'll probably see a lot of people pick Tennessee to win the game as an upset and a live dog to watch. Tennessee and Baton Rouge. Tennessee will have 2 weeks to get ready for that game after the Florida game.
Is it me or does it seem like Brian Kelly to LSU is Clark Griswold going and visiting cousin Eddie's family by himself?
Yeah, that's a good point. But Brian Kelly
it's not a shot at LSU fans. I'm sorry, but it just feels like that.
Yeah, well, it might have been Dave. Let's be honest, but Brian Kelly trying to adapt. I respect that, and very, very happy for him and his family that he was able to get down there and be with LSU. But I don't know. I just at some point, like I value coaching, and I think Brian Kelly is worthwhile to go get. I think he'll win because he's going to have players. So if he doesn't win, then it's the ultimate test of, well, maybe fit does mean more than we even think in college football. Because if Brian Kelly can't get it done, and to them getting it done probably means winning a national title, but he does have to clean some stuff up, and it's a chance for Tennessee. Like if Tennessee goes and wins at LSU because of what that program is, it'll give a lot more credibility to Tennessee. And by the way, Dave, if Tennessee beats Florida and then beats LSU, well, watch out with the conversation in Knoxville and around the nation.
True, and those are the swing games that I've pointed out that could go either way. As far as trading athletic departments, I want to get to Texas A&M, but one that you discounted pretty quickly is Florida, which I found pretty interesting because I look at their athletic department. Again, we're weighing football heavier. Okay, so
Yeah.
and people that I talk to in coaching circles really, really like Billy Napier. I
Mhm.
really like Josh Hypel for my own eyeballs. But and the more I hear about Billy Napier, there's a consensus out there that he's going to get it done. And I think it's important to note that both LSU and Florida, a little bit before your time, you're younger than me, were pretty bad for decades.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's a guarantee they get turned around, but Billy Napier is an interesting story to watch as the season unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, you think about what Spurrier and Meyer were able to do, and that shows what the potential is for Florida. The potential is to be the best and somebody that nobody wants to face. But we've also seen Ron Zook and Dan Mullen and Jim McElwain, they really have a tough time. So right now, I agree with you with what you said about Billy Napier. I think he's really well respected, and it absolutely could work out. That's a guy that, yeah, if he really wanted Tennessee, maybe he ends up as Tennessee's coach a year ago. But part of the issue there is they've got multiple collectives, and recruiting is not off to the start that honestly I expected it to be. You've had the Jaden Rashada story that's gotten so much attention with the quarterback committing to Miami over the Gators, but they just have a lot of work to do, and that's a program where I start to wonder, okay, why has it been 14 years since you won an SEC title? It's been a long time for Tennessee, don't get me wrong, but it's been quite a while for the Gators, way too long for what it should be. And if we're talking about trading places, I am factoring in basketball. I definitely have Tennessee ahead of Florida. I definitely right now have Tennessee baseball ahead of Florida, which has a ton of potential with their baseball program. So it's not like you're dropping off in a big way if you take on Florida's baseball program. But football has some things to clean up. Tennessee's football coach probably has his program a little bit ahead of where things need to be in the direction. But let's see in September, because Tennessee fans can also sit here and say, yeah, Josh, but you're aware of the record, right, between us against the Gators. And I think that's the fear that's creeping in is, hey, even though the game's at home, let's see Tennessee get that win, because we've done this dance too many times. If Florida comes and wins the game in Knoxville this year, then it's an ugly conversation in Knoxville the next 48 hours or longer than that. So it's a really important game for both teams for the directions of the program. Right now, I do like the direction of Tennessee's program a little bit better than Florida because of off-field conversations.
Agreed. What about Texas A&M? I think they're on the verge of challenging for an SEC championship. Would you trade athletic departments if you're Tennessee with what A&M has done?
Probably. And part of it is where football is, the talent on that roster. They're a preseason top 10 team, it looks like, going in, and they just have so much money, and that that means a lot. It doesn't mean you're going to win it all. It doesn't mean you're going to lead the way. Texas has had a ton of money, and it's struggled to get out of its own way for so long now on the football side. But man, you really do have some advantages. And I know about the Jimbo Nick conversation, but if anybody's in Jimbo's position, if anybody's in Texas A&M's position, I mean, Tennessee's been called out a little bit, right, with its collective approach, and I think Tennessee's handled it all well. But I mean, that's the game right now, and Texas A&M has advantages against most. So it's a state with a ton of talent. It's a program right now that is running top 10. Jimbo Fisher is one of the top coaches. He's one of only a few coaches that have a national title. It's tough to not trade places with Texas A&M if you're Tennessee. Now, if you say, well, I don't want to be Texas A&M, I totally get it. But in terms of what the program has and what the athletic department has, it has most of the advantages.
Yeah, let's talk quickly about two teams that are coming into the SEC in Oklahoma and Texas. And Texas, let's start with here they are recruiting like there's no tomorrow and doing a fantastic job. They get Arch Manning. They got another big pickup or two or three this week, depending on when you're listening. And ultimately, Josh, so I don't know that I believe in Steve Sarkisian as a coach. I mean, he may prove me wrong, but he's had his issues as a head coach, not to highlight them, but I'd feel better with Josh Heupel right now than I would Sarkisian. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. I have real Steve Sarkisian questions. Now, if he keeps getting these players, it's not going to matter most likely because
That's true.
my goodness, they are rolling up the high level recruits, and it starts with Arch. You get Arch, and all of a sudden everybody starts hopping on board. But I mean, Tennessee fans saw that right in the '90s. You get Peyton Manning, and you get more talent that comes in to Knoxville. So take what I said about LSU. I would still probably take Steve Sarkisian over Les Miles, and I think from a coaching standpoint, Orgeron. The question is, are they going to get stops? Like their offense could score last year. They have players. They have the best running back in the country. They have one of the best receivers in the country. They have the top quarterback ranked commit. I know Tennessee fans could say, no, Nico's better, and maybe so. I hope we get to find out with them head-to-head in the SEC in a few years because that would be a whole lot of fun. But what I said about Texas A&M applies to Texas. They've got the money. Now, they've had people that have gotten in the way, and that is why Texas has not gotten back, as we've asked so many times. But Jimmy's and Joe's, if you can get the players, and I like if we're doing the all athletic department conversation, baseball's in terrific shape. They made the College World Series again, beat Tennessee head to head this year. They were really good. First team out in the World Series. Chris Beard in basketball is terrific. We get to see Tennessee, Texas again this year, which is going to be great. But so yeah, the coming to the SEC conversation, no Tennessee fan is going to say, yeah, I'll trade with Texas because of Tennessee, Texas, UT versus UT. But if you could trade what Texas has, I think Tennessee fans would do that pretty quickly.
So are we actually saying on both sides, do we agree that Tennessee has one of the top 4 or 5 athletic departments in the SEC, even with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma?
Maybe. I think it's a toss-up with a few of those. And again, when you have this conversation, it means you're trading the people that you're currently pulling for. And fans don't want to do that. Like, you don't want to trade Tony Vitello. Don't do that.
No.
Yeah.
But,
so, and Rick Barnes, I think, has been great for Tennessee. People want to see more postseason success and should. He does too. But you should love Rick Barnes and love Josh Hypel with what he's doing. I said on the radio this week, by the way, tell me if I'm wrong, but football coaches, that is a stressful, grinding job, and you have to be made a certain way. But I think since Philip Fulmer, Josh Hypel has been the most relatable coach that Tennessee's had. Maybe you could say it's not the highest bar, Josh, but that's the sport. So he's relatable. He has an offense that fans are going to like. But I think with Danny White. So David, it's also this. Danny White is, I think, a really good athletic director. I think he's hired really good people. I think that athletic department has a strong staff. Some people that you've heard of, some people that you haven't heard of. Their creative team is really good. They're in really good shape, and things can always change. That's the world of college athletics. Consider that we both kind of dismissed Florida as somebody that you trade places with. That'd be difficult to say previously, but right now, I think Tennessee fans should like the leadership, the structure, and the direction of Tennessee athletics.
They have insane merch at Zool Beer right downtown with a big panoramic view of downtown. They've got pop culture stuff. It's a really, really nice merch. So check it out at Zool Beer. One of the things you said about Josh Hypel that I recently wrote, Great Minds Think Alike, is that he kind of has that everyman approach. And I'm not knocking his looks, but I've always said fear the good-looking head coach, because I think athletic directors will hire people that look good in front of that podium at a press conference, and it ultimately does not mean they can coach a lick. I think they hired a good-looking guy in Lane Kiffin. Now, he could coach, but we saw what happened there. And I'm not knocking Josh Heupel's looks, but he does have that everyman approach. Like, you could just walk up to him in the grocery store and say, hey, do you know where the laundry detergent is? And he would answer you.
He would. Yeah, I mean, he's not Kingsbury. That's a good-looking guy. I can say very confidently, and he knows what he's doing offensively too. Well, jury's still out on how much he's going to win with the Arizona Cardinals. Couldn't win at Texas Tech the way they hope, but I think he has the personality that fits that way as well, and I think he's good for Tennessee football. But also this, so he has the kind of everyman look or attitude. But he's also been a part of big-time college football. He won a national title, was a Heisman runner-up at Oklahoma, and coached at Oklahoma for quite some time. And that is a program that has standards like Tennessee. So he's experienced that, while also he's found a way to carry the relatability that fans are seeking, especially in a town like Knoxville, where football is king and college football matters so much. And, the way fans want to connect with the coach, sometimes that can be overwhelming. I don't think it's been for Josh Hypel. He also, the way they play, I mean, their offense, the way they play, what we hear about the way the staff has tried to connect with players, it's not that different from what we're talking about when trying to connect with fans. So what Josh Hypel did going in, you know what he does? I think he listens. And a lot of times coaches aren't going to listen. They might tell you they will, but they ask you a question, then they wait until you're done. I think Josh Hypel actually hears what you say to him, and that matters to a lot of people.
Best looking coach of all time, brought to you by Zool Beer, and I'll leave you with that. I'm going with Tom Landry, stately, in the suit, which you can't wear anymore, which is bizarre that you can't dress up to go to a major event on a Sunday. Nevertheless, Tom Landry, best looking, stately, distinguished, best looking coach.
Yeah, I mean, style the hat. He knew what he was doing.
You got one? I mean, your Raiders have had some interesting coaches back through the day. I wouldn't put Art Shell or John Madden up there.
The late John Madden would rank high on my list. Dave, take you to a good meal too. Some turducken. Put me down for Ditka.
Ditka, a good-looking guy. If you're about to get in a bar fight,
Tough, rugged.
Listen to Josh Ward on the Sports Animal. I'm Dave Hooker. This has been a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.